So what I wanted to share with you today is one of the new features that we have added and the functionality actually to make change management a lot better. So I'm titling this the perfect change management for SAP PI and PO, or as close as it can get. There's always room for improvements and making these things a lot easier, running them more smoothly, but you have to start somewhere on these processes. So that is the core topic of today: how to actually make change management a lot faster, running in a simpler way. So my name is Daniel Graverson. I've been in the SAP integration space for 15 years. Um, and what I can see is a lot of all the things regarding integration haven't changed that much. Oh, let me also just camera. Oh, not mute. Um, Stop the video. Then I'm not getting confused by that. Um, and yeah, I'm father. I guess that's the hobby that takes out a lot of time. But in this process about SAP integration, I would say that the whole change management process haven't changed that much in this period of time. I think the only thing I can think of is that we got the option to export CTS at some point in time. Before that was file, or you had to map some network drives and you could then import these on different systems. That was really painful. And then you got the CTS transport, making it a lot easier to transport and manage these things. Um, but there's still a whole host that it's not really connected with the PI system, so you don't it's difficult actually going back and figure out when something was changed, what kind of CTS was it in, and what was the reason for it. And then the other improvement that we had was this thing about iFlows, that you can now export all of these things together and run them. Um, so integration is pretty important to your business, and I guess if you're on this webinar, it's probably the things that you're working with. So you're probably biased and would say it's the most important thing. But I reckon that a lot of companies, or a lot of companies, have really a large footprint in integration and what is going on there. And what happens if something fails? It's not just that the specific message is failing and some PI developer needs actually to do something. It's also in the greatest context that other people actually need to understand what is going on and fix it. So for instance, if you have a message that failed, it can mean that this specific order does not meet the timeline for production requirement. Yes, integration is customers' money, getting data from your customers. So if you're not meeting the requirement for planning, then you may not be able to deliver the order, and then you may not actually be able to break, or you break the SLA with that specific customer. And I know a lot of customers in the car or automotive industry, there's strict SLAs that if you're breaking these, it has consequences and you may lose those as customers. You could also stop the production depending on what systems is actually going on. So you want to keep that to a minimum. And then it's also extra work for businesses to actually fix these problems. But I wanted to talk about governance, because governance is one of the things that actually keeps us, or are able to document what we have done, why we have done it, and what's going on in this process. So the whole process of governance is actually to require developers to do some documentation of what they have made, why they have actually changed something, and be able to have the link and say, it was actually this business person that asked for these things, and it was not just something that I as a developer thought, well, this could be fun to do and I will just do it, without any consent or any reason for doing it. So it's about keeping this link between what the business requests actually to what is implemented. And the normal procedure, and I've been involved in a lot of different companies, they have a lot of different ways that they document. They have downloaded some Word document at some point in time saying, well, this is, just fill it in something like this, and you would see customers do it in a lot of different ways. And or they may have some different systems that are handling these different things or these documentations, so you can actually put them there. I think when I started with this, one of the things that with documentation was we had to create it, then we could dump it in Solution Manager, never to be found again. And I think that is a part of this, that we're actually just creating documentation for no real purpose other than someone at some point in time can actually see what's going on. And when we're talking about documentation, it's something that we spend a lot of time on actually creating, maintaining, doing quality check, actually ensuring that it's correct. And I would say most of the time you would see that this is out of date. I would reckon that you're probably seeing these kind of documentations where it just says initial version. And that's all, and you have no clue about what's actually happened since then and what was the reason why something was changed on this. Another change or challenge that I see is that there's actually going to be a lot more integration going on, and that means a lot more developers need to be involved in creating all of these documentation. So you probably have a lot more developers, consultants on your team that are doing integration, and with that it becomes even more complicated actually to show them or train them in how they should be transporting or documenting changes in your landscape. So one customer I was working on, we had a large difference, or it took some time actually to understand how you should document these things and what were the flows in these processes, how do you actually create it, the service request, and how do you link it to all the different requirements that were actually was there. And it was really a tedious process on this. And then once we have done that documentation, that the business people needed to go in and say, what did he actually document all of these different things correctly? And that meant that it took longer time to actually control this, validate that the transport was okay. And the other problem is that you probably would end up having a lot more developers on your productive system because they need to fix some things from time to time or do and I would probably I probably have to admit that from time to time I have been changing communication channels directly in productive setting because that was the easiest way to do, and I'm not certain that I was able actually to replicate these things to the other environments. So at some point in time when a transport had been made, this feature may be reverted and you need to apply that again to actually make this work. And I also see that as a challenge because the more people that have configuration access, the more people can actually make problems and run some of these different things. So at Figaf we have a different take on integration, and this is what I want to show. So we have created an object that we call a ticket, and a ticket can be linked to a service request, a Jira request, or whatever you have, that service desk that the business had said this is something that is bugging us and we wanted to have it fixed. And it contained all the information, all the PI objects that's actually involved with this transport or this service request. So instead of you having to create a document, maintain it and run it, you just have one place you can have all of these objects. So what are the objects that we actually needed to change to fix these things? what were the transports that we were making, what were the tests involved, and what were the yeah, the alerts that actually caused this. So if there was actually an alert that caused us to do something, we can find it in here. And all of these requests is linked. Yeah, this can be linked to solution manager.jira, or you can just link directly to the ERT application, and then people can see it live. And yeah, so let me show you what we have here. So here I've created a transport request. This transport request is just a normal PI transport request. We have created a message mapping that's being fixed, and there's a new system that we've added that we want to get through in the landscape. So I will release this one. So now it's being released, and if we go to our to the ERT application, we would then be able to create a new ticket. So we'll create one here that's called service request 802, and we have chosen an external numbering, because then you can actually create whatever instance you got in your ticketing system for these things. So we'll have what's called lowercase, and this is in progress. It's service request. So the normal way we would have would be to go in here, and then we would select the objects that we have changed. So we'll see we have changed just right now. We have changed these things, and then we can actually see what was the difference. The new thing we've added is we've added transport, just so as we have with CPI and API management. We have also added an option to do CTS transports and file also. But I reckon that CTS is the most common way of doing these things. So what I'm doing now is I'm adding this CTS transport to the ERT application. So it now knows that for this ticket we have these two CTS transports, and if we go in, we can see what kind of object is involved in this. This is a communication channel, and did I forget one thing? I forgot the message mapping for this, so that was not good. Okay. Yeah, and I did release it, so I guess I will just need to let me just export another one. So we'll just create a new transport. So we'll have two transports. So here I have my PI system. We have this FI posting that will then be releasing. So it'll be 19. So we have now released this, and we will also create this as a CTS transport. Transport organizer. So what we will see in this one is that we will then have this FI posting, which is a new updated message mapping. We can go in and see what are actually being changed between two versions. So we can compare our message mapping, and we can see that there was a change in the function from upper to lowercase, as the business expected. And what we can then go into is our ticket. We can then see our tracked object, and we can see what was actually being changed for this setting. So now we have a way we actually want to test what was going on. So we can look up all test cases involving in this one. So we got one here. We can then run, so we have a way we can run this on either our development or QA system. Now I'm just running it on one system. Testing template was run, so we can see it here. It was processed, and we can view our results. It should normally go pretty fast. I guess I restarted the system. So normally we would see that this is working okay. Okay. We probably just need to run it again. That will be easier. So we'll run, then run it on the same system. View results. We received it, and we are getting an error. We can then say, okay, this was lowercase, whereas it was supposed to be, or we expected it to be uppercase. So we can say, okay, we will mark this one as a new test case. Oh, I got to do new results. So we just want to select mark as a new test case. So now we have created a new test case for this. So instead of having this one, we would attach this one ticket, and then we will add the new one, because that is the one that makes sense and that now is valid. So we have accepted that this works. So we would then go and do our import. So didn't I release these? So we got 18. So we'll import this. So this is, and I guess this all depend on how you would normally do your CTS transports. And these will then run for some time. I guess this would be done now. So what we have added is that in the ERT application, you can go into this configuration. So you have our landscape. We have one that's called 3 file in our transport. So we have this communication channel. And so one of the problem we often have is that we need to specify what the file should be called, or the password, or the user, or something like that, or host name should be called on your productive systems. So here we can just enter what kind of data this should be, if there should be any changes to our modules that we have added in this this process. So this makes it really simple to actually see what's going on in this, and we will also be able to mark those areas that is actually marked as transportable. So now we have done this, and we're actually ready to do our import. So if we do our, let's see, our import here. So we'll check the import, and this is a little lengthy process because we need to do a synchronization afterwards. But what it's actually doing is it will import this, validate that it's actually and validate that it's there, configure it, and then it needs to do some synchronization afterwards. We would expect that this would run in a batch job at some point in time, so it would be something you shouldn't care about, and you should just know that this has happened, and you can then check the status of these things. And And then for the other transport, we can also see the data here. We can also check our import and see if this one is imported correctly. And both of these takes like 40 seconds to run. But the main goal is actually to integrate more with these tools, so you're actually able to see specifically what was changed in this process. And what we actually have now is that our tracked object, we can see all of these objects that have been added to our flow, so we can actually see what was the reason for adding these different things. So yeah, so we can see the message mapping was also added on both systems. We can then run our test cases also on this new system and check that it also worked on DPO. So we just have one place where we can actually run these things and see what is going on. And now we're actually done with this change. So without having to actually do a lot, we were able to create a new ticket, and we obviously want to generate some documentation or create some documentation to actually show what was going on here. And in this we have this Excel report, and so we got our ticket number, so we got information about the service request, who created it, what are all the different objects that we have involved in this process, what kind of test did we perform, and how were there any of these tests that failed, and it will also be able to show these are the things that actually was tested. And then we can see what kind of transports we had for this when they were imported for all our different objects in this case, and we can drill into these and see more details on this. Then you probably also want to have some scenario documentation. So what we want to go is to our ICO. So we have links between all of these different things. So now we are at the ICO. We have the option to generate a scenario documentation, and this is also pretty useful. So here you can see all the different objects that's involved in this transport, and you can see the change history of these things. So you can actually say, okay, we did a change on this day for this specific business reason, and that way the business can actually know what was going on. And if you're getting an audit, you can give them this document that they can see this was actually what was changed. So this was the new things that we have added with regards to transports and managing your PI scenario. So there's some areas that we are looking on how to improve. But if you have any questions, please put them into the chat or raise your hand if you want to talk on these things. Until that, I'll just continue. So yeah, our main focus has been just to give you a good way of documenting all the different changes that are happening in your landscape, link them to a business reason, and then be able actually to showcase what's going on here. So as we talked about, support is one crucial thing, and you've probably seen the, I don't know if you're one of these guys that are getting an inbox full of container-based message alert and are not really doing anything with these, but just saying, well, some point if I get time, I'll probably go through this and figure out how to solve this. We have created a process that actually enable you to actually set up rules and filtering for a lot of these alerts, so you can actually notify the correct person in charge of this, specify how to solve this issue, and specify when it will be solved. You can set up automated processing of these alerts, so if you have a message that failed but just needs a restart, you can do that. You can send send webhooks to other information or other systems. So let me just show you what we can do here. So we have our support tool here, and here I have a list of my different rules, alerts that are being processed, and we can see here there's actually an alert coming in here. Notification was sent, so we can see that it's sent the default alerts, and we can see here some error information about this. We got that this is the error message, and if we want to say, okay, this is normal, we are getting this from time to time, yeah, we can either create a ticket and link it to a ticket, or cancel or resend the message if there is a message. But in this case, we want to create a new alert or new rule that just say, okay, this is normal. So we say it's just file, just not just exist. And I guess we just want to do nothing with this, so we will say this initial status is done. It's a file error, so you have a way you can put labels in, making it easier for you to find the alert that's been triggered. And you have the option actually to do XPath in this, so you can actually say it's whatever error hash. Do we have a system? And I guess we have the PI sender system. So we have XPath here. So we can get so we can have business system. We don't want to do anything. We want to mute similar notification for 20 minutes. And we want to send an email to a specific user on this topic, or we can set up Jira or something else with this. So we can now, so next time we'll get this rule, it will then find this, and the alert will be processed instantaneously, or it will not do anything with this. So it's a lot easier to set up rules for these things. You can get a trial version of this, Paveen. Just go to figaf.com/IRT. We don't have the transports there yet. It will be in the next build, and we'll talk a little about this later in as a beta thing. But at figaf.com/IRT you can download the tool. Good. So that was the support, and yeah, making it a lot easier to actually handle a lot of these normal mistakes that you're getting. And here you can give information about how to solve them if it is a problem, link to some specific documentation on solving this specific issue, meaning that you don't need that highly skilled developers to man this, and you can actually get support people to manage more of these different things. Then testing obviously is an important part of this, and the whole process about testing is either after patch installation that you want to be able to see that nothing have been affected by your system, and testing that message mapping modules and adapter processing have not changed. You probably have been hearing that there's the Figaf or the SAP PI tool out, and it does have some options to test, but I would say, and maybe I'm a little biased, that the ERT tool from Figaf is easier to set up test data from. You can collect more patterns, module data, more bridges and support bridges. It can generate reports, as you saw. It has a built-in generator for report, and it can anonymize data, so you can actually test with near productive data on your salary instead of, and you don't need to go and do a lot of modification on it, the tool, and I guess that's spelled incorrectly. Um and yeah, you can integrate it with other, as you saw here, it would reuse these same test cases when you're doing modification, so you actually don't need to do a full test, but it will actually just say, for this specific case, these are the things that will actually run. Do you want a demo of how easy it is to create test cases with the Figaf tool? Then put it into the chat. Otherwise, yeah, we have a lot of videos on this topic. So pretty simple to select new test cases. So it's simply just a matter of going into select a number of icons, record messages, create a new template for it, record some messages, start the recording, and then the system would actually handle all of the processing itself, and you'd then at some point figure out, run these tests locally, and you'd then figure out how to configure this. But we have made this as easy as possible, so you would actually be able to create test cases instead of just not creating the test cases that is needed. And the same way of running tests in CPI, or same process from in here. In the system, it's a little different. Okay, so yeah, I think this makes testing a lot easier, more user-friendly than the PIT tool. Obviously, you now have a challenge. You can say, okay, this is okay. It looks pretty cool, but what's actually the reason why I can convince the business that this is something one should be investing in? And I think one of the big things is that you want to keep the knowledge that you have in your organization. Um, so when your developers leave, either because they get a new job or because they're consultants that are done on a specific project, you want to have the information internally and the processes in place actually to support these cases. Otherwise, it doesn't make a lot of sense to actually have a project, make some modification, and then run it. So there may be some different way you can actually document this, and you want to have some documentation that is updated. And I think the support tool will make a lot of these manual steps and processes about how to actually handle alerts a lot easier, because you just have one tool that can do all of these different things without having to go into different places and find out what kind of area we can fix these things in. Short term, you would be, if you're planning on doing an upgrade, you would be able to do that faster, because you have test data in the PI tool that you can just connect and start up with. I would say that you'd also get a faster deployment of changes to production, because as you saw right now, it's able to actually document all your changes, run all of these components, and it's, yeah, with that you can speed up the development. You don't need to as much time on doing QA on these changes, because it's just there, and it saves time for the developer, meaning it will be a lot cheaper to make all the new interfaces that it requires. And it's just one way that you can manage both PI/PO, CPI, and API management, and monitor, and all within one tool. Longer terms, hopefully, or there will be less errors in your integration, because you're able to actually test it. You have a sufficient regression testing tool in place that actually enable you to test that this does not affect anything. You have a better documentation of what kind of changes you have, so you know that the documentation always can be generated and is up to date, and you're able to fix interfaces even when a developer leaves, because you get this test data and you can just test it. Um, Once you have built up a larger list of all of these support cases, the number of cases that will go to a developer that need to be fixed will be lower, because you can set up, say, this is not relevant, and that may it will be easier to see what's real important that we need to fix, and then you can process these things, and then we'll get a more stable environment, and that will save you money in that perspective because of all of these different things. So you can try Figaf as by just going to this one here. There's a free trial version that you can try out. I'm not actually sure how much it will enable you to do with regards to transports. We haven't released the transport yet. I would assume that it will be in the next build in a week or two time, where you would then be able to see how this will also work. So the way we're running this is a standalone Java application, and we have a number of different deployment options. So you can either run it on your laptop. It has a built-in database that runs, and this is probably more from proof of concept perspective. Obviously, if you want to scale this to a full organization, it doesn't make a lot of sense because it is too centralized in that perspective. We also have a Docker image, so you can deploy it in either in your Docker installation locally or in the cloud instance. So we have guides on how to set it up in Azure. So you can run it in Azure, because it's sometimes difficult, as this last one is to get a database or a server internally that you can run these things on, that can either run Oracle, SQL, or DB2, or Postgres. Postgres is a free tool for running this application. It can potentially run on your PO server, but it's less flexible, and I reckon that it would be better to have it as a separate system running, because then you would not be dependent on the SAP updates and what's going on there, and you would, if you're running an SAP upgrade, you can be sure that it doesn't affect the ERT application because you're running it. The pricing, if you just want the testing, we have plans that start at like 10,000 euros a year, and the DevOps is starting at 20,000 euros a year. Just compare this to how much you're paying for a developer. What just one month easily adds up to this, and if you're able to save that, get better quality code, fewer problems, it's and yeah, same. And I guess for developers also, you don't have to do all this tedious work about configuring things, make sure that they work correctly. And you can see, yeah, so it's based on the number of ICOs, the number of developers, and the number of systems that you have in place. So we have just released this, and we want to get some customer feedback about how this actually works in a real life scenario. So if you want to try this out, go to or send an email to support@figaf.com and provide some feedback on these different things. We will set you up with an enterprise license, so you can test out how all of this integration all the transport is actually does work, what kind of information you can get from it, making it easier for you to actually both test it internally, but also figure out how it works in your organization and sell it to the business. Say, okay, this is actually what is going on, and this is why we need this tool. Some of the things that we are looking on is we would look at how you can add CTS to our tracked object. So we saw the list of all these different changes that you have. So somehow would be really easy to, or make it easier for people to see if you have this object, when was it changed, and what are the objects that was involved in this transport. Link the CTS obviously to the scenario documentation as you saw before. For channels, set up adapter metadata, so you're actually able to see what are the changeable parameters or non-transportable parameters that you have. Link the changes into configuration to a specific ticket. We are working also on a way to retrieve all the password from your system, so you can actually configure it across the landscape, and it doesn't work, or it would work easier and have stored repository of passwords that you can apply. And then this thing about landscape configuration, if you have a system that's called something in development, what it would be translated to in production and QA. So trying to map these also. We probably will also add ICO configurations, so you can configure those across the landscape also. It's not that often you're making these changes, but from time to time you would have something that's configured differently in the different landscapes. And then we want to make a full process regarding this, so you can actually see. So instead of actually doing something on the QA system, it will actually see once you have released the transport every 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it will go in, look, are there any new transport imported on my QA system, do all the necessary configuration for it, and then run the tests that have been assigned to this interface, and then you can get a report that says, hey, we have run these tests on this system, and this was what it looked like. So that was all I wanted to share in this webinar on these things. If you have any questions or comments, do drop me an email, or otherwise I'm here in the chat.